All right, so today we're diving deep into, well, you guessed it, Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. This one's a classic, and, it's known for being a bit dense. So we're going to break it down and hopefully make it a little more digestible.
Yeah, exactly. We'll try to pull out some of the key themes and ideas and, maybe even spark some interesting conversations along the way.
Exactly. So Nietzsche, he's dealing with some pretty big questions here. Life, meaning, purpose, the whole human condition shebang.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And Thus Spoke Zarathustra is it's his attempt to kind of reimagine philosophy. It's not your typical philosophical treatise. It's more like a blend of philosophy, poetry, and even prophecy.
Yeah, it's definitely unique. I mean, the whole thing is framed as this story, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Zarathustra as this kind of prophet-like figure.
Exactly. So Zarathustra, he's been up on this mountain for like 10 years. In solitude, total isolation. And then he decides to come down and share his wisdom with the world.
Okay, so why the mountain? What's the deal with all that alone time?
Well, for Nietzsche, solitude was absolutely essential for deep thinking. It's about disconnecting from the noise and distractions of the world, all the opinions, the shoulds, the expectations, and really connecting with your inner self.
So like a mental detox.
Exactly. It's like hitting the reset button on your mind. And, for Zarathustra, this period of solitude, it's crucial preparation before he can even think about sharing his radical ideas.
That's interesting. It kind of makes you think about the pressure we all face to constantly be on, connected, plugged in, available. Do you ever feel like you need that kind of deliberate disconnection just to process your thoughts and figure out what you believe rather than echoing what everyone else is saying?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's more important now than ever. We're bombarded with information 24/7. It's easy to lose sight of your own inner voice in all that noise.
And Nietzsche's definitely challenging us to think for ourselves, to question everything, to break free from what he calls the herd mentality.
Oh, yeah. He was all about individuality. He wanted us to question those inherited beliefs, those societal norms that we often accept without even thinking.
And speaking of challenging norms, let's talk about one of his most famous and maybe infamous pronouncements. God is dead. This one always gets people riled up, even today. So what's the real message behind that statement?
Right. So it's not about a literal death. It's more of a provocative metaphor.
Yeah.
Right? Nietzsche's pointing to the decline of traditional religious beliefs and values in modern society.
Okay, so it's less about atheism and more about a crisis of meaning, a recognition that those traditional sources of morality and purpose, like religion, were losing their grip.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the old answers might not be working anymore and that we need to find new ways to create meaning and purpose in our lives.
And that leads us to another one of his big ideas, the will to power. Now, this one can sound a bit intimidating. Is it about, dominating others? Survival of the fittest?
That's a common misunderstanding. But it's actually much more nuanced than that. Think of it as this fundamental life force, an energy that propels us towards growth, creativity, and self-expression. It's the urge to overcome limitations, to expand our horizons, to become the best versions of ourselves.
So it's not necessarily about power over others, but about personal power, the power to shape our own lives and reach our full potential.
Exactly. It's about mastering ourselves, pushing our boundaries, and constantly striving to evolve.
I see. That makes a lot more sense. And it actually connects pretty well with the idea of the Übermensch, which I know we're going to get to later.
Absolutely. The will to power is it's like the fuel that drives that journey towards becoming the Übermensch.
Okay, cool. Now, there's one more concept that I have to ask about because it always trips me out a bit. Eternal recurrence. What's that all about?
All right, so eternal recurrence. This one's definitely mind-bending. Imagine this. What if every single moment of your life, every choice, every joy, every sorrow, it all just kept repeating over and over again for all eternity?
Whoa. Okay, that's a lot to process. Is that even possible? Is he saying that's literally what happens?
Well, it's more of a thought experiment than a literal belief. It's a way of challenging us to think about how we're living our lives. If you knew you had to experience every moment again and again, would you change anything?
I think I'd definitely be making some different choices, especially with those late night snacks. But seriously, that's a really powerful idea. It makes you think about the weight of your actions,
Exactly. And it really highlights Nietzsche's emphasis on living authentically and creating a life that you truly love, a life that you wouldn't mind repeating forever, even with all the messy bits.
That's a high bar, but I think I'm starting to get it. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Solitude, the death of God, the will to power, eternal recurrence. It's a lot to take in. But let's bring it back to Zarathustra for a moment. He eventually comes down from that mountain, right? He's got all this wisdom, but now he needs to share it with the world.
Right, and that's where things get really interesting. He encounters all sorts of people, and he challenges their beliefs, and he provokes them to think differently about the world. He's like a philosophical disruptor.
Sounds like my kind of guy.
Mm.
But what's his core message? What's he trying to teach people?
Well, one of the central ideas is this concept of the Übermensch, which is often translated as the Overman.
Okay, before you go any further, I have to ask, is this like a Nietzschean superhero? Because I'm kind of picturing a cape and tights situation.
Uh-huh. I can see the appeal of that image, but no, it's not about physical strength or superpowers. The Übermensch is more of an ideal, a higher form of humanity that transcends conventional morality and creates its own values.
So not about conforming to existing rules, but about creating your own. Like being the author of your own ethical code. That's pretty radical.
Exactly. And it's closely linked to that will to power we were talking about. The Übermensch embraces their will to power, not to dominate others, but to achieve self-mastery and create a life of meaning and purpose.
Okay, so the Übermensch is like the ultimate individualist, someone who forges their own path and doesn't let society dictate their values or beliefs.
Right. They embrace their individuality, they question everything, and they constantly strive to become the best versions of themselves.
I like it. But how do you actually become an Übermensch? Is there, like, a step-by-step guide, a Nietzschean self-help book?
Well, Nietzsche doesn't give us a clear roadmap, but he does offer some powerful metaphors and insights into the process of personal transformation, like those 3 metamorphoses he describes.
Wait, 3 metamorphoses? This is starting to sound like a philosophical superhero origin story. Tell me more about these transformations.
Okay, so Nietzsche uses the camel, the lion, and the child to represent 3 stages of spiritual development.
Interesting. Okay, so walk me through those. What do they represent?
The camel symbolizes the burden bearer, someone who accepts the weight of tradition, expectations, all those shoulds.
Okay, I think we've all been there, carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders.
Exactly. But then comes the lion, who represents rebellion and self-assertion. The lion breaks free from those shackles, roars its own truth.
So the lion is about challenging the status quo, finding your own voice, and refusing to just blindly conform.
Precisely. And that leads to the final stage, the child, which represents a state of innocence, creativity, and a fresh perspective on the world.
Okay, so we go from burden-bearing to rebellion to a kind of rebirth. What does that childlike state actually look like, though? In real life, I mean.
Think of it as a return to wonder, a sense of playfulness, a willingness to see the world with fresh eyes, without judgment or preconceived notions. It's about letting go of the past and approaching life with a sense of openness and curiosity.
This is fascinating. It's like Nietzsche saying that true freedom comes from shedding those layers of societal conditioning and rediscovering that spark of joy and creativity that we had as kids.
Exactly. It's a powerful metaphor for personal transformation. And, we all go through these stages in our own way.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far, and I can already see how his ideas apply to our lives, even in the 21st century. We've covered a lot, but there's still so much more to explore.
It's amazing how these ideas, they were written over a century ago, but they still feel so relevant today. Nietzsche's philosophy, it's almost like a toolbox. It gives us all these concepts and ideas that we can use to make sense of the world and our place in it.
Totally. It's like he gives us this new lens to view, well, everything, really. And one of the tools I've always found super intriguing is his exploration of, well, this might sound a little out there, but the Apollonian and Dionysian forces. And I know we're dipping into Greek mythology here a bit, but how did these concepts actually play out in this book, Zarathustra?
That's a great question. So think of the Apollonian as the force of order, reason, and structure. It's the part of us that seeks knowledge, clarity, and control. It's the architect, the planner, the one who's always striving for perfection and balance.
So it's like the voice of reason, our inner critic that keeps us in check, the one who's always reminding us to make lists and color-code our calendars.
Exactly. Now, on the flip side, you've got the Dionysian, which represents chaos, passion, and instinct. It's that wild, untamed energy, the kind that drives creativity, ecstasy, and, a total surrender to the moment. It's the artist, the dancer, the one who embraces the unknown and revels in the raw beauty of existence.
So it's like that impulsive part of us that says, hey, let's dance in the rain. Or, let's book that spontaneous trip. The part that reminds us to, well, to just live a little, right?
Exactly. And Nietzsche's point is that both of these forces, they're both essential for a fully realized human experience. We need both.
So it's not about choosing one over the other. What about finding a way to integrate them, to embrace both the structure and the spontaneity, the reason ain't the passion?
Exactly. It's about finding that dynamic tension, that balance between order and chaos. You think about a great piece of music, it needs both that structured framework, the rhythm and the melody, but it also needs the passionate expression of the musician to truly come alive.
Wow, yeah, that's such a great analogy. It's like life itself needs both those Apollonian and Dionysian energies to create something truly, I don't know, beautiful and meaningful.
And Nietzsche argues that suppressing either of these forces can lead to imbalance and ultimately a diminished experience of life.
Yeah.
Too much Apollonian control, it can stifle creativity and joy, but then unchecked Dionysian energy, that can lead to recklessness and, even self-destruction.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, right? That place where we can, express our wild selves without completely losing our grounding.
Exactly. It's this constant dance, this delicate balancing act, and it really requires self-awareness and a willingness to, embrace the full spectrum of who we are.
That makes sense. Okay, so we're talking about finding balance. But Nietzsche also seems to put a lot of emphasis on questioning everything. He really wants us to challenge conventional wisdom and think for ourselves, right?
Absolutely. He's constantly pushing us to examine our beliefs, our values, even our most cherished assumptions. He's like, don't just accept things blindly. Dig deeper, question everything, be skeptical.
It's like he's handing us a philosophical shovel and saying, all right, go excavate your own truth.
I love that. Exactly. He wants us to be active participants in our own self-discovery, not just passive recipients of, received wisdom. And honestly, this is even more crucial today than ever before. I mean, think about it. We're just bombarded with information from all sides, all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Drowning in it. Opinions, news feeds, social media. It's almost impossible to filter it all and figure out what's real, what's actually true.
Exactly. And that's where that call for critical thinking becomes so important. Nietzsche's reminding us to develop our own internal compass, to cultivate that discernment, to become conscious consumers of information, not just blindly accept into everything we hear.
So it's about developing that inner BS detector, learning to question the narratives that are constantly being thrown at us.
Exactly. And it's not just about external information. He also wants us to apply that same level of scrutiny to our own internal narratives, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we're capable of, and what's possible in our lives.
So we need to become investigative journalists of our own minds.
Yeah.
Uncovering those limiting beliefs and challenging all those self-imposed restrictions that are holding us back.
Right. That's the idea. Now, speaking of challenges, Nietzsche doesn't exactly shy away from talking about suffering, does he? He actually sees it as a really crucial part of growth and transformation.
Yeah, he's famous for that line, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But we should probably be careful about romanticizing suffering too much. What do you think Nietzsche's really getting at here?
I think he's saying that challenges, even when they're painful, setbacks, they can actually be opportunities for really profound learning and growth.
So instead of viewing those hardships as something to be avoided at all costs, he's saying we should kind of lean into them. Yeah. Embrace the struggle as a chance to become more resilient.
Exactly. It's like that saying, smooth seas don't make skillful sailors. It's through weathering the storms that we really develop our strength, our resourcefulness, and that ability to navigate all of life's ups and downs.
This makes me think about how we often try to shield ourselves from discomfort, right? Both physically and emotionally. But maybe there's some wisdom in embracing those moments of challenge, allowing ourselves to really feel the full spectrum of human experience, even the difficult parts.
Absolutely. And Nietzsche would argue that it's through those very experiences, the suffering and overcoming, that we discover our true strength, that resilience and that capacity for growth.
So it's not about seeking out pain or anything, but about kind of reframing how we view it, right? Seeing those challenging moments as opportunities for transformation, not just something to be endured.
Exactly. And this ties back into that concept of the will to power. It's through overcoming obstacles, through pushing our boundaries, that we really tap into that inner strength and that drive that moves us towards growth and self-realization.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I'm curious about, about Nietzsche's views on relationships. Does he think we should all just become solitary hermits, embracing all this suffering on our own little mountaintops?
No, not at all. He actually places a lot of value on relationships, but he's very specific about the types of relationships that foster growth and those that hold us back.
So what kind of relationships is he advocating for? Like, what should we be looking for?
He's looking for connections that are based on mutual respect, shared values, and, a real commitment to individual growth. He's wary of relationships that are rooted in, in neediness, dependency, or a desire to control the other person.
So it's about finding those people who challenge you, who inspire you, and who support your evolution as an individual, right?
Exactly. It's about finding your tribe, those people who celebrate your individuality, who encourage you to become the best version of yourself.
I love that. Finding those kindred spirits,
Yeah.
The people who really get you, who see your potential, and who are walking alongside you on your journey, not trying to change you or hold you back.
And Nietzsche would say that those types of relationships, they're essential for our growth and our well-being. They provide that mirror for us to see ourselves more clearly, a sounding board for our ideas, and a source of support as we navigate all the inevitable challenges of life.
I can see that. But how does this fit with his critique of conformity? That whole herd mentality thing he talks about so much. It seems a little contradictory.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And it highlights a really important nuance in Nietzsche's thinking. He's not saying that we should isolate ourselves or, reject all forms of community. He's critiquing the kind of blind conformity that stifles individuality and, that prevents us from thinking for ourselves.
So it's not about avoiding groups or social structures altogether, but about being mindful of the influences they have on us, making sure we're not just following the crowd without really questioning why.
Right. He wants us to be conscious participants in the communities we choose to be a part of, not just, mindless followers who blindly accept whatever the prevailing norms or beliefs are.
It's like choosing to be a member of the orchestra, contributing your unique instrument to the symphony, rather than just, being swept along with the crowd at a concert.
That's perfect. That's a great analogy. And it applies not just to social groups, but to any system of thought, any belief, any ideology that tries to, impose this one-size-fits-all approach to life, Nietzsche wants us to think for ourselves, to question the rules, and to create our own music, so to speak.
As we're talking about this, I'm realizing just how much emphasis Nietzsche puts on personal responsibility. It's like he's saying, look, you're the author of your own life. Don't blame others for your circumstances. Step into your power and create the life you want.
Absolutely. He's all about empowering us to take ownership of our choices, our actions, and ultimately our destinies. He's saying stop waiting for permission or, external validation to define your own values, set your own goals, and chart your own course.
It's like he's handing us a map and a compass and saying, the journey's all yours. Where do you want to go?
And that can be both incredibly liberating and, kind of terrifying, too. It means we have that freedom to choose, but it also means we're accountable for the consequences of those choices.
That's so true. Empowering and daunting all at the same time. But I think that's the beauty of his philosophy. He's not offering any easy answers. No step-by-step guide to life. He's challenging us to really grapple with the complexities of existence, to think critically, and to actively create a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling.
Exactly. And that requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to step outside of our comfort zones. It means embracing the unknown, experimenting, failing, learning, and growing along the way. It's
about becoming the heroes of our own stories, not just passive characters who are, swept along by the currents of life.
And I think that's a message that resonates with all of us, regardless of our backgrounds or beliefs. We all share that desire to create a life that's truly meaningful and fulfilling.
This has been such a rich exploration of Nietzsche's ideas, and honestly, I can already feel how his work is prompting me to really examine my own life, my choices, my aspirations.
It's incredible how these ideas, from over a century ago, they can still feel so relevant, even urgent in today's world.
Absolutely. And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I'm really eager to explore how we can apply this wisdom, to really navigate the challenges and opportunities of modern life. All right, so here we are, the final part of our Nietzschean adventure. I gotta say, this deep dive into Thus Spoke Zarathustra has been pretty mind-blowing so far.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. Nietzsche, he really challenges us to think differently about, well, about everything, really.
Exactly. And now that we've explored all these big ideas, I'm wondering how we can actually apply this wisdom, to our everyday lives. Like, how do we take all these abstract concepts and actually put them into practice, especially in the crazy world we're living in?
Right. It's one thing to talk about these philosophical ideas, but it's another thing entirely to actually embody them.
Exactly. So where do we even begin?
Well, I think one of the most practical takeaways from Thus Spoke Zarathustra is this emphasis on self-knowledge.
Yeah.
And, self-creation, like really taking ownership of who we are and who we're becoming.
Right. The whole idea of becoming the Übermensch,
Mm-hmm.
the author of your own values, the master of your own destiny. It sounds amazing, but it's also kind of a daunting task.
Oh, it definitely is. It's not, it's not a quick fix or anything. It's a lifelong journey of exploration and growth.
So where do we start?
I think it starts with a really honest look in the mirror, like a deep dive into our own, into our own psyches. Who are we at our core? What do we value? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are those things that really motivate us? What kind of impact do we want to make?
It's like Nietzsche's handing us a mirror and saying, okay, take a good long look, really get to know yourself. Because, only then can you start to consciously shape the life you want to live.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond all those, those superficial labels that society puts on us and all those expectations, and really digging into those deeper layers of who we are, asking the tough questions, the ones that might make us squirm a little bit, the ones that force us to confront our shadows as well as our light.
It makes me think about the importance of introspection, like carving out that space to really listen to our own inner voice, to figure out what feels authentic and true for us, rather than just, going through the motions or following a path that someone else has laid out for us.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process, right?
Yeah.
We're constantly evolving, changing, discovering new things about ourselves as we go through life.
So it's about cultivating that sense of curiosity about who we are, that willingness to just keep exploring, keep learning, even when it gets a little uncomfortable.
Exactly. And it takes courage too, right? The courage to confront those parts of ourselves that we might prefer to keep hidden. The courage to challenge those limiting beliefs that we've been carrying around for who knows how long. And the courage to step outside of our comfort zones, to embrace the unknown.
This reminds me of those three metamorphoses that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That journey from the camel to the lion to the child.
Yeah.
It's like Nietzsche's saying that real self-creation, it requires us to shed those old skins, right? To break free from all those limiting beliefs and to embrace a more playful, creative, and authentic way of being.
Right. And that process, it can be messy, it can be challenging, it can even be painful at times, but it's through those moments of discomfort and transformation that we really discover our true strength, our resilience.
So it's not about avoiding the hard stuff. It's about learning how to navigate it, to use those challenges as fuel for growth.
Yeah, exactly. And this brings us back to that idea of the will to power. It's not about dominating others. It's about mastering ourselves, pushing our own boundaries, and channeling all that inner drive towards creative self-expression.
It's like becoming the artist of our own lives, right? Painting our own canvases with these bold strokes, experimenting with different colors, different textures, and not being afraid to make a few mistakes along the way.
Yeah. Exactly. It's about embracing that whole process of experimentation, the trial and error, the constant learning and evolving.
Now, speaking of evolution, I'm wondering how Nietzsche's ideas can help us navigate this crazy world that we're living in. Everything's changing so fast, the technology, the social landscape, it's a lot to process. It can feel pretty overwhelming, honestly.
It absolutely can. And I think, I think Nietzsche's emphasis on critical thinking, on adaptability, on self-reliance, it's more relevant now than ever before. He's urging us to become really discerning about the information that's coming at us, to question the narratives that are being presented to us, and to really cultivate that inner compass, to help us navigate this complex world.
So it's about developing that mental agility,
Right.
the ability to adapt to new situations, to learn from those inevitable mistakes, and to just keep evolving as the world around us changes.
Right. And it's also about cultivating that sense of resilience, knowing that challenges and setbacks, they're going to happen. They're inevitable. But they don't have to define us. We can choose how we respond to those difficulties, how we integrate those experiences into our own stories, and how we use those challenges as fuel for growth.
This makes me think about that idea of eternal recurrence.
Yeah.
That we were talking about earlier. That thought experiment of reliving every single moment of our lives over and over again for eternity.
It's definitely a powerful one. It really forces us to confront the weight of our choices and to ask ourselves, are we living in a way that we would be willing to repeat?
It's like this cosmic reminder to really make each moment count, right? Mm-hmm. To infuse our lives with meaning and purpose, and to create a story that we would be proud to tell, even if we had to tell it a million times.
Yeah, and that story, it doesn't have to be, perfect or extraordinary. It's really about embracing that whole spectrum of human experience, the joys, the sorrows, the triumphs, the failures. It's about finding meaning in the messy, imperfect beauty of it all.
This has been such an incredible deep dive into Nietzsche's world. And, while his work could be challenging and even a little provocative at times, I think there's a really profound sense of hope and empowerment that's woven throughout his philosophy.
I agree. I think he's ultimately an advocate for human potential. He's reminding us that we have the power to shape our own destinies, to create meaning in a world that often seems devoid of it, and to live lives that are truly authentic and fulfilling.
So to our listener out there, we encourage you to take what resonates with you from this exploration of Nietzsche's ideas. Embrace your individuality. Cultivate that will to power, question everything, and never stop learning and evolving.
And remember, that journey of self-creation, it's ongoing. There's no final destination.
Yeah.
No ultimate arrival. It's about embracing the process, the ups, the downs, and that constant unfolding of who we are becoming.
Beautifully said. And with that note, we'll leave you to continue your own philosophical adventures. Until next time, happy deep diving.